Today on Locked On Canadiens, I'm turning the tables on all our listeners.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1030 of Locked On Canadiens. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. And in the spirit of that, my name is Oliver Saba, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined today by Scott Matla. And as you can see, this episode is a little bit late. Scott had an emergency. He was not able to make the episode. Everything's going to be okay. He's fine. We'll see him tomorrow on tomorrow's episode. Don't worry about that. But he had done all the prep for the show. So I'm going to have to go off script. And I decided at the very last minute to come up with my own topic. And I'm going to do something that I don't think I'm going to be able to get away with, or we as a show are going to be able to get away with too many times. But for the first time, I want to do what I would like to call a reverse mailbag episode, where I'm going to ask you, the listeners, your thought, the way that you guys do. And I am going to share my own thoughts in response to these questions, but I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a miscellany in terms of topics. As you know, there is a Bruins game on Thursday night. We will be recapping that, but we're also expecting actual mailbag questions from you as well, so that we can complete that episode with our Friday tradition of mailbag. Real quick, Bruins, this is the fourth and last game between these two teams. The Canadiens won the first game in overtime, and then they lost the last two. The way the Canadiens have been playing, we're expecting that they will be rising to the occasion against a much better team. Samuel Montembeault, who I'm expecting to start, will probably have to do the same thing that he's been doing all season, and really be standing on his head and bailing the team out. I expect big things from the top line. Honestly, I'm expecting them to give us hope that they can hang with the Bruins, but then lose, which to me is the ideal scenario, because we are looking at that draft pick. But it is the Bruins, so if the Canadiens are going to win any games, this is a game I would really like them to win, just because, storied rivalry, etc., etc. The Bruins are, as I think I'm a little bit more scared of them than Scott is. Scott does feel like they are, I would say, not a paper tiger per se, but on their way out. How about that? Like, they are on their way to decline, right? They have played very well this season. As we know, they dominated last season before an unceremonious exit in the playoffs. I personally feel that they're a team that the Canadiens do need to take seriously, but by the time the Canadiens are contending, it's going to be a bit sad, because I don't think the Bruins are going to be there, and I miss that sort of rivalry where they're both good teams or both bad teams, and you have a lot more even play in that rivalry, and it doesn't become a story of shenanigans or circus or anything like that. Like, that's the shame, like with Toronto too, is that when they're good and they have those elite players, Montreal, despite being able to beat them, they were not necessarily toe-to-toe with them in terms of talent. Did make it funnier every time the Canadiens beat them. It was 3-1, blah, blah, blah. But it just, in my mind, I would like the rivalry to be at a place where both teams are either bad or mediocre or good. And as the Canadiens, as we know, are in a rebuild, I would hope that these two teams are still good enough to give them a run for their money when the Canadiens are in their contending window. So that's pretty much it with the Bruins game. The couple of surprising things that I learned, actually, was one, the Canadiens, I think for the last 2 weeks or so, the last couple weeks, yes, have not only the top penalty kill in the league, again, only for that short period, but also along with the Rangers have allowed the fewest goals in the NHL, which that was something that was really surprising to me. I found that out. I was scrolling the news today. A couple of things I also read. Eric Engels had a piece on Brendan Gallagher and his mom's battle with cancer on Sportsnet. Definitely check that out. He also talked about Primo. Check that out. And then there was a podcast. I believe it's a French language podcast on which Patrice Bergeron was heard praising Nick Suzuki. So that's also something where uh, you know I would like everyone to go check it out. It was really good. So I will link those in the show notes, both on the YouTube as well as the audio. So those are the things to check out. Also, don't forget to send us mailbag questions at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com or leave them in the YouTube comments. Just put mailbag question or MBQ at the beginning. Also, a couple of administrative notes, like Scott and I still have not nailed down our very, very important guest to celebrate our 1000th episode, which is 30 episodes ago, but it's still coming. We've not forgotten it. It is coming. It's just a matter of logistics, when somebody's very big and important, very busy and important, I was going to say. So that's also on its way, and we are going to be doing some more bonuses, and I have some fun guests lined up next week. Scott has some work stuff that he has to do, so I will be having some cool and fun guest hosts. All right, all of this to say, what's a reverse mailbag? I'm going to ask you, the listeners, your opinion. Obviously, I'll give you my answer as well. And I'm just going to ask you mailbag questions, and you can answer them, and we can bring them up if you like. You can, let us know if we can share it on the show. And you can tweet them at us at LO_Canadians. Also DM them. You can send them to us, like I said, lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, or leave them in the YouTube comments, and I'll number the questions so that it's easier for you guys to answer instead of having to timestamp it or be like, at 6:37 you asked this. So without further ado, here are my mailbag questions for all of you. And again, you don't have to answer them, but I do love starting conversations like this. This is something that I tend to do in my daily life. I like to come up with trivia questions. I like to come up with stuff like fun exercises, even in my work life, things like that. But I've never done it on the podcast, and I figure with Scott and I here today, I'm going to take advantage. And again, this isn't something that I'm going to do regularly unless you like it, but I'm assuming it's one that you'll only let me get away with once. First mailbag question. Mailbag question number 1. What, in your mind, is the Habs' biggest draft need this upcoming draft? So, assuming that none of the players that get traded away from the Habs are in the prospect depth chart, it could be, the Habs could trade pending free agents somebody like a David Savard, a Yoel Armia, try to get rid of Josh Anderson's contract, Christian Dvorak, all of that stuff is on the table. Even Caden Primo, let's say. Anybody who's an NHLer could get traded, but nobody like a Joshua Roy or a Logan Mailloux or, any Hudson, Reinbach, or any of those guys, Engstrom even. Let's say the prospects stay as is. The Canadiens do not give a prospect up in any pre-draft trades, right? So the depth is the way it is. What is their biggest draft need? In my opinion, I think they either need, and this one is going to be a bit controversial because I know this is something where the Canadiens did actually go and do what they thought was that last season, is I think they need if they're not going to go for elite game-breaking offense, this is going to be a top 7 pick. In my mind, they even have a shot at the top 5. We know they're probably, they're not going to fall lower than 8th or 9th, right? That's to me, the worst case scenario. In that top 10, there's going to be a guy, and it's going to be an offensive talent. And I want the Canadiens to go for that. That to me is their biggest draft need. Now, offensive depth is an issue at the moment, but we don't know how any of these prospects are going to pan out. I think when you have somebody like Owen Beck in your depth chart and okay, this guy's not going to be your top line center, but he's a lock for third line and he's going to be amazing at that. I'm not too worried about that, right? We don't know where Philip Machar is going to play right now. It's not like the Habs have a very crowded, depth chart past, let's say, the top line plus center, right? You've got your top line, you've got Kirby Dach, and then it's not a lock for anyone else. It could move around, even with Joshua Watt. I'm not locking anyone in there. So I still think they need elite game-breaking talent. Somebody who could literally challenge any of the 4 players like Slavkovsky, Kirby Dach, Nick Suzuki, and Cole Caulfield. Like somebody who could legitimately challenge that, because then you're having more versatility on your top 2 lines. Ideally, they would get 2 of those in that, in the next 2 years, let's say, the next 2 drafts that they have. But also, because they went out and got somebody like David Reinbacher last year, I think if there's a guy that has the potential to be a Roman Yossi, or somebody even like to a Victor Hedman type, like that guy usually goes in the top 3, but you never know. Somebody who has that potential, like I wouldn't be mad at that. I don't want them to spend a draft pick that they could use on explosive offense on a defenseman like they did last year. That's all I'm asking for. So elite offense, and then if there's a potential, like if somebody has a ceiling like that, like they're shooting for the fences, but that person has a ceiling where legitimately they could be a guy like that, I would want them to take that shot. So that was my first question. So question 1, that's my first mailbag question to all of you. So please send me your answers and let me know what you think. I'm excited to hear them. But in the meantime, I have many, many more questions to ask all of you. And that's all coming up next. But first, this episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Grocery bills are so expensive these days. I don't know about you, but I'm really, really feeling it. It's tough. But now they don't have to be, because you can start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, so you can buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps will give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, everybody, we are doing a reverse mailbag, a out of the ordinary episode for us. But if you guys like it, let us know, because I would love to do it again. All right, let's talk about question 2. This is our mailbag question 2. And if you're just joining us, I'm asking the mailbag question. I'm giving you my opinion of what the answer should be, but I want to hear all of yours. Question 2 is the future of Habs goaltending. So let's say it is like our next season is 24-25. The following season, 2025-2026. Do you think Samuel Montembeault and Caden Primo are going to be the goaltenders on opening night? So the summer of 2025 is when Caden Primo's contract expires, and he's an RFA at that point. So my question to you is, are they both going to be the goaltenders? Like, in my personal opinion, I think Caden Primo will not be a Montreal Canadian, and it will be time for either a Dobesh or even Fowler. Like, it's 2 years away. I know goaltenders take a longer time, but I don't know. I'm just every report on him, every scouting report on him, like talks about how elite he is and how much he's grown over the past year, and that was even with the promise that he showed as as a draftee. So I personally, I think that that's the way it's going to go. But you guys let me know. Like, does, Caden Primo steal the starting spot? Does he get renewed? Does, is there some sort of protracted negotiation? Whatever. So at the beginning of the season in 2025-2026, are the 2 goaltenders we currently have, Samuel Montembeault and Caden Primo, going to be the NHL goaltenders for this team? Question 3. This is a fun one. So the Canadiens will have a salary retention spot starting on July 1st. who do you think they use it on? So that's my mailbag question 3. Personally, I don't think they're going to use it on Josh Anderson just because of the length that they're going to have to deal with it. I think with Josh Anderson, they're going to suck it up. They're either going to hope he gets hot and there's a I can fix him FOMO type GM that's going to come in and grab him, or they just keep him on and hope for the best. I really don't see them um, handcuffing themselves in that way. I also don't see them really using it for a guy that will come off the following year. So, like, remember, Jake Allen's going to, come off in the summer of 2025. Um, and so for me, like, they would probably use it on someone who's going to be around a little bit longer than that. And I'm looking at this team, and um, actually, it's not so bad. Like, there's some players that'll still be around. I think Josh Anderson is only going to be UFA in 2027, so it's not 3 years. It's going to be 2. Um, no, it is 3 years. Sorry, I can't do math or read. um, so, like, to me, like, who are they trying to remove from this team? Like, the guys that they want to get rid of. Christian Dvorak, it'll be only 1 year, so that would be tempting. So, if not Josh Anderson, who could it be? Like, for me, the most logical thing would be Christian Dvorak because he doesn't make that much to begin with. Well, I guess that's relative. Like, his contract is 4,450,000, so 4.5 million ish, and he doesn't come off the books until the summer of 2025. So from my perspective, that seems like the best way to do it because you'd really only be doing it for that 1 year, that one season, right? It could make it more tempting to grab him. Like, I just, as much as I want it to be Josh Anderson, it's more for more years. It's just, it's going to be 2027 before that comes off. So I don't think they're going to do that. I also, I don't know that Brendan Gallagher with his no movements and everything, like, I don't think anyone's going to be calling for him, and I don't think he's going to want to go anywhere, right? David Savard might make sense just because it's a smaller hit, it's a smaller amount of time. Yoel Armia is another one. It's a smaller hit, it's a smaller amount of time. Like, they both become UFAs the following summer, so you're only carrying around, like, let's say half that salary, you're only carrying that around for 1 year. So, like, for me, the prime candidate is Christian Dvorak because it just sweetens the deal. It's a little bit, it's 1 year longer than the other two, but I'm seeing that that's what they use it on because it does feel like somebody like Savard or Armia, like, it would definitely sweeten the pot, but the fact that he's only signed for 1 more year, and he's also been playing so well right now, like, I think that there's a chance that they could get him off the books without having to use that retention spot. Or, you know what? Maybe he just keeps up the play that he's had this season, this resurgence that he's had, and the Canadians have a use for him for the year. Maybe he gets traded at the next trade deadline for only that short amount of time. I do think, like, for me, like, the ideal thing would not be Josh Anderson, believe it or not, because of the length of it. Like, and like with Brendan out, it's just going to be impossible. No trade, no movement. He doesn't want to go anywhere. Nobody's calling for him. Josh Anderson, like, there's a chance somebody might call for him. And then in that case, you know what? What are they offering? If they're offering you enough, then you can retain salary. I don't think he's going to fetch that much unless he, like, totally finds his game. But he's not going to do that in the next, like, 16, 17 games left. I think it's 16 games now. I don't think that's happening. So to me, like, the prime candidate is Christian Dvorak. That was a very long-winded way of giving you my answer, but I still have plenty of questions for all of you in my reverse mailbag, and that's coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA, available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, let's get into the, I guess, last segment of my reverse mailbag. If you're missing that, we are doing reverse mailbag where I ask you all questions. I obviously give you my opinion as to what my answer would be, but I want to hear from you. We've done question 1, 2, 3. So question number 4. Who do you think the Montreal Canadiens will sign next in free agency? I think even though the team is not close to contending or what we expect them to look like in the future, etc., I think the Montreal Canadiens still need bodies. Like, we saw that there was they were desperate this year with all the injuries, and the Laval Rocket were, I hate to use the term, they were rocked by injuries. And so they had a lot of struggle with their depth. At the same time, I really liked what a guy like Sean Monahan brought to the team, for example. I feel like a guy like that, who's a veteran, who's still got a little bit left in the tank, but only wants a 1-year deal to prove himself or to get back on track, like in Monahan's case, was a bunch of injuries. Somebody like that, where they're going to be around for a short term, so a 1-year or a 2-year deal, somebody relatively cheap, somebody that can provide intelligent play defensively. So I don't ideally have like a specific candidate in mind, even though I did look at who's going to be a UFA this summer. I just feel like whether it's a forward or defenseman, like this team desperately needs help just on their overall defensive game. It's not just about like who's playing defense and if they're playing zone defense or man-to-man, which we're going to talk more about a little bit later in our actual mailbag episode. I just feel like it's got to be someone, like it could be someone a little bit older, maybe not as fast, not at the top of his game, but they desperately need to be smarter on defense. Like to me, like there's a lot of brain farting going on around the defensive play of this team. And it's interesting too because the players that have been able to successfully get better at defense without sacrificing what they bring to the team, the list is Nick Suzuki. And that's not enough, right? So I'm assuming that they are going to trade David Savard. There are going to be takers. I think I think they need bodies, they need depth, and they need people who are better at executing on defense. I forgot to mention where you can send us the answers to these mailbag questions that I'm asking you. You can reach us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can leave them in the YouTube comments. And you can tweet them. We're at LO_Canadians. We love to hear from you. Also, ask your own mailbag questions so that we can tackle them on tomorrow's show. Or if you want, we can just discuss all of your answers to these. Like, I can't wait to hear from you. So, I believe we're on question number 5 now. I really hope we are. This is a subjective question, obviously. You can pull up stats if you want and give them to me if you want. Who do you think is the most improved player on the team this season? I think by far it is Slavkovsky. But if we want to go organizationally, I do think that Joshua Roy and Logan Mailloux deserve mentions, because I'm not including Gignac really, because he's not really, like, they did sign him to an NHL deal and that was great, but he's not part of the Habs' future plans. I'm also excluding anyone who's not playing in the NHL or AHL. And I think I don't want to include Jaden Struble because I don't think he's the most improved. I think he's always been this way and it's just really coming out now. Like he's in an optimal position for this to be coming out. Question 6. I want to know in your mind, how long it's going to take for the Montreal Canadiens to contend. We get asked this question all the time, and honestly, depending on how they've played and how the prospects have been doing and who's coming over, like we know Engstrom, Reinbacher might be one game away from coming to Montreal or to Laval, I guess. Um, when do you think they'll contend? We get asked this all the time. Like personally, in my mind, sometimes I think it's going to be 5 years away. Sometimes I think it's going to be 2 to 3 years away. I think that it's reasonable to expect that not next season, but the following season, the Canadians will be able to make the playoffs. And I think maybe another 2 years from that is when they'll be like a threat. Like it's like, oh, it's a good team you don't want to face. Like if they're always in the conversation. They might, like many teams, end up getting kicked out unceremoniously in the first round despite having a dominant season. But like that dominant season, because remember, their division is tough and there's a lot of teams in the rebuild and eventually they're getting smarter. We are going to talk about Detroit at some point, not today. I was going to get into that for this episode, but then I thought about it and I was like, like it's like they're like it's a mess right now and I need to make sense of it before we bring it up on this show. So that's my question. Like, when do you think the Canadians will contend? And that's it. Please send me not just your mailbag questions, but your answers to my reverse mailbag. You can send them to us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can leave them in the YouTube comments. You can give the answers on Twitter. You can either reply or DM them to us. We don't mind. LO_Canadians. Let us know if we can read them out on the show. And let us know what you think. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know. I like this is something that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. I took advantage just because Scott had already done all the prep, so I hadn't for today's show. We usually take turns on that. So I decided to go with a reverse mailbag. And if you like it and you want more, let us know too. Like this is your show as much as it is ours. We want to hear from you. We want your opinion. We want you to drive the content. So please, please, please let us know. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadians. You can find me on Twitter or any other social media at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for listening, and we will both be back tomorrow.